Welcome back to the Alchemical Life podcast. This is your host, Abigail Crow speaking. I am a strength coach predominantly for runners and hybrid athletes, and I also am an endurance runner myself, but I like to dabble in all of the things. And today, I want to actually, if you're new, let's just take a pause. All of my regular listeners who are awesome, we've got new awesome people in attendance, and let's just pause for them to really quickly like, subscribe, leave a review. We'll wait. Don't worry. No rush. But anyways, seriously, I do welcome you guys who are new. And I wanted to talk today about strength training. And I wanted to talk about strength training for runners. But I think that I've made a lot of episodes about this, got a lot of different titles going on strength training for runners. But I really want to get into the weeds as to physiologically, like, why does this actually matter? Why does this really help you all? What is going on in the bone, in the muscle, in the tendons, in what is it doing to regulate blood sugar? Why is strength training actually good for us as runners? But overarching, I want to talk about, like, why is strength training good for people? Because as a runner, you are also a human being, I'd like to think. And so you're an insane one. You're an insane human being, but you are a human being. And so I want to get into just like strength is good for people to do. And so as a runner, it's even more important because you are now one of those people, said people, who is insane, who's doing insane things. You guys are doing a lot of crazy things with your body on a regular basis, anywhere from 3 to like 6 days a week, sometimes 2 a days, and if depending on what kind of runner you are or what kind of hybrid athlete you is. But it's important that you are strength training. And so what does it really look like? What mechanistically is occurring that it's actually so great? Why is it so great? Okay? And so I'm going to talk about why strength is good for people. And then we'll get a little bit more into you as a runner. How does this apply to you? How does this help you? How does this carry over into what you're doing with your life and your day? And then we'll get out of here. and then I'll let you guys go. Okay. You guys can also leave at any time. You do have free will in this. If you see me looking down, I'm going to be looking at my notes because that is what I do. Otherwise, it devolves into chaos. I don't think devolve is a word. Whatever. Strength is good for everyone. And this is because of several reasons. One, muscle tissue actually helps with managing blood sugar and insulin sensitivity. Running does this as well, of course, but it does this a little bit better than running because it is more sustained. What it also helps do is it helps reduce intramuscular fat, and improving muscle also improves muscle tissue, which is good. And when we have this reduced intramuscular fat, improved muscle tissue, we have not just an improved likelihood of lifespan and longevity, but of health span, right? The quality of life that we experience as we get into our older years. And if you're like me and you're a younger person, you're like, blah, 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 blah. But as somebody who's going through some serious health issues right now, I am becoming much, much, much more grateful for strength training and the strength training I've done and the strength training I'm going to continue to do, because I think I would be in freaking shambles if I had not had this with the health issues that I'm experiencing currently. So do not just wah this out. This is something that you are going to want to pay attention to and listen to, because everybody does get old. If you're lucky, we get old. So not everyone does get old, but if you're lucky, we get old and you want to live in your older years really well. So it allows us to improve cognitive function. It helps with our daily tasks. It prevents sarcopenia and osteoporosis, which is muscle wasting, bone wasting. And by having more muscle, we improve vascular function, which reduces overall heart strain. So that's pretty nice. Overarching, strength is just good for humans in general. Like, having muscle is something that is beneficial for people in general. And there are health professionals that could create hours worth of content about the benefits of having muscle on the body. I don't want to get too in depth into it because, one, I do not have the authority to speak on that as well as other credentialed individuals do. But two, because I want to get into strength training is great for people, but also where does strength training help with runners? So if you are looking for some resources of, generally speaking, why is having muscle a good thing for humans in general, then people like Peter Attia is really good. People like, oh my God, who is that woman? Hold on, pause. Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. She also speaks very heavily on the importance of muscle and gaining muscle for overall quality of life. Now that that's over with, let's talk about some of the areas of the body that are improved via strength training and how they apply to running. We're going to talk about the tendons, we're going to talk about the bones, and then we're going to talk about the muscles, because it is not just muscles. Okay, there's so much more happening. All right. So let's first talk about tendons, right? Tendons are definitely a requirement in running because running is just one big, long, extensive plyo over and over and over again. And if you're a sprinter, it's one short, intensive plyo over and over again. So running is an expression of tendons and their ability to perform for us. The Achilles in and of itself takes anywhere from 5 to 8 times body weight when you're running. And so we want things that help train the tendons so that when we go out into the running world, the tendon can express its full capabilities in a very healthy way. When you want to train the tendon, you want to think moving slowly, whether that be an isometric or big heavy loads isotonically, so having shortening and lengthening of the muscle. And when we strength train, when we do those heavy lifts or the heavy longer isometrics, you are allowing for intramuscular coordination to occur and tendon stiffness to improve. And this translates efficiently to better energy and release and storage during the ground contact phase. And that ground contact phase is when the foot hits the ground and is about to push off again to propel you forward in your run. This one is very interesting because the thing about tendons is tendons kind of go against what a lot of runners see strength training as, which is very low weight, high repetition exercises. There are studies that are coming out that are finding that those very high repetition exercises or the very long holds with zero body weight or minimal weight are not necessarily the best for improving tendon stiffness. They actually found that heavy strength training is better for patellar and Achilles tendon stiffness. And so if you want like a real structural adaptation shift, then you want heavy loads, sometimes super maximal loading. And that's why a lot of people will do like just eccentric training for the Achilles tendon, just the eccentric portion of a calf raise to help with injury mitigation, remodeling of that Achilles tendon. You need a stimulus that's going to be great enough to improve physiologically the tendon stiffness and work on the structural integrity of the tendon in and of itself. And so if you're doing light loads or very low weight, long holds, there is going to be an analgesic effect that occurs, so you might feel better. And I do think that that's really beneficial for warm-ups. That's really beneficial for if you are trying to get to a place where you can load, but you're kind of in an inhibited state or you're in pain, then there might be room for those things. And I do utilize those techniques, if you will, in the strength room. But you are going to want to have a stimulus that is great enough to create real adaptation around the tendon. And in order to do that, then you're going to want heavy and sometimes even super maximal loading for those properties to do the thing that they need to do. And tendons are one of those things too where they're very sensitive and very finicky, and it will get to a place where when the tendon begins to bug you, if you've dealt with any kind of tendon injury or pain before, then when the tendon starts to get agitated, it is very hard to get it to a place where it feels good again. Once it is fired up, it is just angry and it's cranky and you really have to baby it, but you have to baby it properly. And that's why I never recommend full rest. You don't want to just fully rest and let the tendon do nothing, because that's also going to exacerbate the sensation of pain. But being able to train the tendon properly and, in quote, rehab it properly to a place where you're back to running and you're running pain free is important. And so doing things like those long holds, maybe a little bit higher repetition, lower weight things to introduce you and provide that analgesic effect, remove the pain or the sensation of pain, and then get you to a place where you can lift a lot heavier, you can load a lot heavier. Doing very heavy eccentrics, that kind of thing, is going to help so that when you get back to running, which it might be several weeks, sometimes even months, they're showing now that it's about 14 weeks, I believe, for the tendons to really show signs of like lasting improvement when you've injured them. Once you get to that space, you're running and the effects are more permanent, so that you're not in this constant flux of being in and out of this rehab state with your Achilles or your patella. There are other tendons, but those seem to be the ones that people have the most trouble with. So now I want to go into bone density in running. As somebody who is like 90% sure that she's dealing with a stress fracture, I feel pretty passionately about this right now. First things first, go get your blood work, because especially if you're a female runner, I had been running with very low ferritin, and low ferritin and stress fractures are absolute buddies, very much pals. They go super well together. So, of course, strength training is going to help mitigate this. But if you do have poor blood work or poor blood markers, please address those things first, because if you're trying to work out of a deficit, it just does not work well for you. Well, it didn't work well for me, and I don't think it'll work well for you either. But on the note of stress fractures, they're big with running. Stress fractures are more common than I would like to see in the running space. The cool thing about strength training is when you get these very strong muscle contractions, they pull on the bone's attachment points called the periosteum, I believe is how you say it. I'm so great with big words. But once it's pulled there, that signals bone remodeling and improves bone mineral density. So it's like getting adaptations for your bone. Whenever you have a hard, heavy workout, it's not just your muscles that are healing, it's also your bones that are going through adaptation as well. The thing about this is that bones take a little bit longer. So put a pin in that and then we'll come back to it. Ideally, if we can improve bone mineral density and we're also improving muscle tissue and tendon stiffness and all these things, then your risk of stress fractures goes down, which is double thumbs up. Awesome. Another cool thing about muscle tissue, which we'll get into muscle next, but muscle is going to help with shock absorption. So the bones are not taking as much of the stress as they might if you have very low levels of muscle tissue. Now, once you start running, right, the initial phases of increased running mileage, you are going to have obviously greater aerobic capacity. You're going to improve some muscular endurance. You're going to have adaptations with those things more quickly. So what happens is you're going to have this phase where the muscles and the cardiovascular system are doing a great job at adapting, but the bones are taking some time. So you're still having these slower adaptations with bone occurring. And this might lead to a little bit more pull and a little bit more force placed on the bones when we run. They just need a little bit more time with the remodeling process. This is why increasing volume is something that you have to watch as a runner. And it's not necessarily weekly mileage. It's more, and they're finding this in research, it's more in session mileage. If you're having all of a sudden these much longer runs or longer and harder runs, this is going to be a little bit tougher for the body to manage. And by the body, I mean the bones. The bones are going to be like, hold on, we are not ready for this. So watching not just weekly mileage, but also in session mileage. So overall volume in session and intensity in session is important. This is something that shouldn't necessarily be new or shocking to you guys, because volume intensity are metrics in anything, strength training, running, any program, any type of athletic endeavor is going to require a careful consideration and look at volume, intensity, and the relationship between the two, and the relationship between the two across this third thing called time. But you have to understand that volume and intensity, while the muscles and the cardiovascular system might have a really good time or an easier time at adjusting to these things, the bones, the tendons are going to be slower. And so you have to give them a little bit more time, even if you feel ready to undergo the adaptations that they need to withstand the volume or the intensity that you are placing them under. And this timing creates that mix match where you have a vulnerable period for the bone to not do so well. And that's what I think happened to me. I think that low ferritin plus getting into a really hard training block where my long runs were turning into a little bit longer runs and also much harder runs. It was just a very perfect storm for a wonderful, wonderful femoral stress fracture. Now, I don't know for sure again that I have it. I just got the go-ahead to call the MRI people, the MRIers, and see for sure if it's a stress fracture, but part of me doesn't want to pay the money for them to tell me to rest for 6 weeks because that's the protocol. But who knows? I'll keep you guys updated. I'll keep you guys in the loop. I know you guys really care. So anyways, in this vulnerable period of time, as somebody who is a runner predominantly, then strength training can help actually with this kind of bridging the gap, because one, your muscle tissues are going to undergo a little bit more damage. We're going to put this all in quotes, damage. So it gives you a greater reason to rest, and also having more muscle tissue is going to pull, remember, on the bones and allow for remodeling and improve bone mineral density so that the bones can withstand more force. When you get into a hard training block, the bones are like, we got it. We're a little bit tired. Yeah, we don't quite have as much time to adapt as the you muscles and cardiovascular system do, but we're good and we'll be able to hang because our bone mineral density is freaking off the charts. All right. Now, muscles. Muscles are my favorite to talk about because, I mean, truly, they're great to have. They look good, they feel good, they're fun. We want them. And so muscles and running. Why does this matter? Overarching. Improved muscle works to power hard and long runs. It helps improve biomechanics by creating better neuromuscular coordination and internal stability, driving up internal stability. So having muscle and running go really, really well together. Now, I will say there's a lot of coaches, strength coaches in particular, that would like to convince you that improving muscle is going to drastically improve your running economy. And actually, studies don't really show that. They show that in elite runners, there was a study in elite runners where running economy, they saw benefits anywhere from like 2 to 8% improvements. Now, if you are a very well-trained runner, this is still helpful, right? Like a 2 to 8% improvements. Every percent that we can get improvement, we'll take. But for somebody who is a hobbyist runner or a newbie, this is kind of like, screw it, I don't really care. But where I do find it to be very beneficial is that it helps prevent form deteriorating as fatigue builds at the end of that long, hard run. So while we might not see these like beautiful improved running mechanics and run strides throughout the whole run, like if you run with a little bit of a stranger gait than some other person, strength training might not drastically help this. But what will happen is certain areas of your body will be able to absorb and produce force so that, one, the risk of injury likely goes down, but also, two, once you get into the end of that run and your form starts getting a little bit like, oh no, things are falling apart, the wheels are falling off, you're able to sustain that for longer, and you're able to kind of hold the fort down toward the end of that run when you have to have that final hard kick. That's where strength training and having some muscle mass helps a lot. And when we're training muscles that don't really get trained at all or hardly ever when you're running, it seems to have a positive carryover for runners. So, and it does this quickly. Like, this is just what I've noticed, right? So when you're training the function of the core, the glute medius, the hamstrings, etc., I've noticed my clients having a really positive transfer almost immediately, like within a few sessions, just because, one, neuromuscular coordination, like the brain is now like, oh, yes, we can work with these things and in this way to carry us through our run more efficiently and more effectively. Improving strength in these areas too also help, again, with things like form deterioration later in runs, reducing risk of injury, that kind of thing. And then, of course, having muscle helps because it's going to help improve tendon stiffness, right? We're also improving that bone mineral density. The muscles and the tendons and the bones all have this synergistic relationship to one another, where strength training, it's not just one of the three. Like, you're getting all of the benefits by doing this. Also, when we improve our maximal strength, it allows that ceiling for rate of force development to increase, so we can have more power. Now, max strength and max rate of force development is going to have a greater positive transfer to a sprinter than maybe a long distance runner. But if we can have better output and more effective and efficient output in each ground contact, if we can have a little bit more power and spring in each ground contact, then that is enough, in my opinion, and I'm biased, to say yes to strength training. So muscle's awesome because muscle allows us to help with tendons, help with the bones. It helps with form deterioration. It helps with improving muscles that either never get trained in running or very rarely get trained in running, or might be getting some love in running, but in an inefficient way or a very monotonous. When we're running, it's just like that same repetition, that same gait cycle just occurring over and over and over again. And so your strength training allows us to have heavier, harder, and newer exposures to certain muscle groups that you might not get in running. You might not have a drastically more beautiful run. So running economy might not be something that's like, wow, I see so many improvements, but overall you're going to see a really positive transfer from strength training over to your running if done properly. I have other episodes on how to structure the training week so that you're using strength training and running and they're programmed in an efficient way so that you're not like having these catastrophic, I'm sore all the time, I'm borderline gonna risk injury worse because of the way that my week is structured. I don't want you to have those things. So scroll down for some of my previous videos. And ultimately, big takeaways are the days of light loads and high repetitions really should be over. All of the studies that we're seeing are finding really positive transfers in strength training for running when it comes down to the tendons, the bone, and the muscle when we're working with pretty heavy loads. Now, this does not mean that I want you guys going to the gym and maxing out on back squat every single week. But what this does mean is getting to a place where instead of working at like a 4 out of 10 RPE, so basically like I could do this all day, I could do this for 20 to 30 repetitions, you're working in a range where we're getting a little bit closer to failure. We're really starting to feel the burn on certain things, and you're starting to feel the burn not on repetition 15. You're starting to feel the burn on repetition number 5 or 6. And so we're staying in that 5 to 12 rep range. Of course, there's areas to do less. Of course, there are times and spaces where doing, 15 to 20 repetitions is more than appropriate, or longer holds, right? If we're doing isometrics. But overall, I think being able to really hammer home the idea of like, guys, lift heavy, and you don't need to go to failure, but you want to definitely be feeling the burn. You definitely want to be feeling like this is harder to move. The rep speed is slowing down. Obviously, keep good form, but once you get to a place where you're struggling to hold that good form, that's when you can kind of get an idea of we're getting to a place where we can stop the set. I want to drill that in because that type of lifting is what is going to create a large enough stimulus to require adaptation that has lasting impacts to not just the muscle tissue, but also to the bone and to the tendon, because all of these things are going to play a really important role in helping you as a runner run faster, longer, stronger, forever. And I wish I had had this information when I had started running. I wish I had had this information when I first started training in general, because I would have been so much more cautious. Ideally, maybe I wouldn't have. Maybe I still would have been crazy, but I'd like to think that I'd be a lot more cautious and smart in my approach to strength training and how it integrates with cardio, because these things take time and they take intentionality. And so I want you guys to be able to take this and this information and now apply it to your training and say, okay, yes, let's lift some heavy weights. Let's go a little bit less repetitions. Let's rest a little bit longer between sets. Let's not increase mileage in one run super drastically. Let's not increase weekly mileage like crazy. You'll see that it works maybe for some people, but it doesn't work for everyone. And sometimes it works for some people, but only for a short period of time. And then you find out 3 weeks later that they're going to the doctor because they've got a stress fracture. So what you see on social media is not always what is real. And that's why I'm so passionate about this podcast and being super vulnerable and transparent on my social media, because I want to give you guys information that is boring and reasonable and be honest with you guys about like where I fail, where I falter, where I don't have the answers, where I do have the answers, where I think I might have the answers, so that you guys can take these things with you into your training and apply them, and it helps you. If you're looking for a program that works for you and you're not wanting to write one, I do have a quiz link below where you can find out which program is going to be best for you and your goals. Quizzes are just fun. Even if you don't buy a program, take a quiz. I love quizzes. So I actually took the quiz. I took the quiz many times because I was making sure that the way the quiz was structured was it was actually referring people to the program that I would refer them to, but also because I just love taking quizzes. It's like 8 questions. It's super easy. So check it out. If you find that there is a program that works for you, please let me know how it goes. If you have any questions on the program, do not hesitate to reach out. If you have a friend that could use it, give it to them. Give it to them. Do it. They could pay for it, which would be nice too. Help a girl out, but also just whatever, send it their way. I just want people to be running well and feeling good while they do it. that being said, cutting it for the week. You guys are awesome. If there's anything you want to know or hear about on this podcast, please let me know. If there's any guests that you would like to see on, please let me know. I love hitting people up in the DMs and just harassing them until they come on a podcast with me. So let me know if you have any requested guests. And with that, I will see you guys next week. Bye.